glad you can make it today. We've got a story that is full of information and things to talk about. In fact, I'm not going to be able to tell you absolutely everything in it, but it is important. And this is something that you will want to read for yourself or have someone read to you if you can. We are now in the last few hours of Jesus' life, and it is time for the Passover. Now, the Passover, you may remember from the stories of Moses in Egypt, was when the children of Israel, the Jewish people, were about to escape from slavery in Egypt. And there were certain things that they had to do. Well, the Passover celebration was a remembrance of all of that. And there were certain rules they would do. People would come from all over the known world at that time, the Jewish people, to celebrate Passover, and they wanted to be in Jerusalem. The city was packed. There were people staying in other people's houses, and it was kind of expected that if you had any kind of home there, that you would have some place where a visitor could stay during that time. It's a very big deal. It involved the sacrifice of a lot of lambs. We're talking about thousands of them. That was a key part of the um, reason for showing their sorrow to God. The lamb was to represent sins that people had uh, on them that they wanted to be rid of. But a lot of this is really the remembrance of God delivering the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay, it's earlier in the day, it's a Thursday, and Jesus tells his disciples, and it really comes down to two of them, Peter and John, are sent into Jerusalem to make preparations for the Passover meal. Now, Passover was a 7-day event. This was the first day of Passover. And they are told, you go into town, you find this man carrying a water jar, and you this is the guy you're looking for. You tell him we're here. The the master, the teacher, wants to use your house. Well, what we find out from different accounts is that this person is apparently a servant, and he is carrying a water jar, and most likely it was so that it would be used during the meal for the making of the unleavened bread and all, because the next day, well, as they got in to the Sabbath and all, people were not allowed to do work, so they had to have things prepared ahead of time. Okay, this seems to have been arranged by Jesus ahead of time, because the man takes them to the house, and then the owner of the house shows them an upper room that's prepared, meaning it's ready for them to use, and they only have to provide their own, um, I would say, the implements of the meal itself that they would have. So, bread, wine, the lamb, that sort of thing. Um, you wonder, why would Jesus do this? Well, for one, he had no place that he owned himself. But another is that, remember, the Jewish leaders are looking for Jesus, and they want to find him as soon as possible to have him arrested. My suspicion is that Jesus had this arranged with several people who followed him but were not one of the 12, and that he picked the person kind of at the last minute. He knew he was betrayed, he knew who did it. So the best thing at this point is not to allow Judas, who had already gotten money to betray Jesus, to know what's going on. Well, all that happens. What Peter and John would have done would have been to have taken the lamb to the temple to be sacrificed, as many other people were doing, and then come back. And when Jesus got there, they were ready to start the meal. Now, from what I have read on this, people could take this meal anytime through the day. Now, for the Jewish people, a new day started at sunset. So they had night, then day. So you had a full day where people could take this meal, and they are taking it early as soon as it started, as soon as it was okay to start the meal. So they have started the meal, and there are different things that happen through the Passover meal. And it seems that Jesus is wanting to incorporate some things. Apparently, people would talk about at the Passover why they were doing this and remembering what had happened. It would be similar to us saying having a Thanksgiving get together, and people talking about old stories from the family and how they've had other Thanksgivings and have enjoyed it. So a little bit similar to that. So Jesus takes bread and he breaks it and passes it to the others and tells them something that probably sounds a little odd to them. He says, take this and eat it. This is my body that's given for you. And they have been with Jesus long enough to kind of go with what he's saying, even though they may not understand this. And then a little bit later, he takes the wine and he divides it among them. Now, whether or not he has separate cups or whether or not there's one cup, what we really need to get from this is that the drink that's being taken is part of the normal Passover meal for the Jewish people. And this is something that he's saying he's kind of adding or changing a bit for his disciples, and something that's going to become standard practice for the Christians later on. And he said, "This is my blood that's poured out." And what that kind of goes along with is, you remember, the lambs were being sacrificed, and part of that was done. They tried to do this as humanely and quickly as possible, and the blood would be spilled from the lamb, and the blood signifies the life and also the sins being removed. And Jesus is saying that his own blood is going to be spilled for the sins of the world. Okay, during all of this time that's going on, he also mentions something about he's going to be betrayed, and by one of you who is sitting with me and having this meal. And there's a lot of information on this, but he's a little bit upset about this, and you can understand that. But then the disciples, well, 11 of the 12 of the disciples are kind of upset, and they're asking him, "Well, Lord, is it I?" Meaning, am I the one who's going to betray you? Because that's the last thing they want to have happen. They don't want to be the one to betray Jesus. Judas says something odd in this, and I never have caught it until just just a little while ago. And he says, "Teacher, is it I?" Hmm. The others call him Master or Lord, elevating Jesus way up here. As a teacher, Judas is elevating him, but not as much as the others. Well, as all this is going on, um, Jesus more or less says to Judas, "It's as you say." And that's a way of saying, "Yes, you're the one who's going to betray me." And um, Peter is sitting at another part of the table, and he's gesturing to John, who's right next to Jesus, saying, "Ask him who it is." And Jesus kind of says to John, "Well, it's the one I dip the bread in and give it to." And there's a whole lot behind this, but he gives it to Judas. Then he tells Judas, "Now, what you are to do, go and do quickly." Well, Jesus leaves, and people know that, well, the disciples knew that that Judas carried the money bag for the disciples. And they thought, oh, okay, he's going to make more preparations, give something to the poor. And the preparations part means that because this is a 1 week long, 7 day uh, feast, that Okay, they've taken care of tonight. Maybe he's going to get something for the following nights. Uh, no one really gets it though, and you find in Luke and in John especially, there's a lot of discussion of what they're saying to each other around this time, and it more or less becomes a kind of normal meal after that. Um, Later on, they understand more of what Jesus is doing. In fact, a lot of it starts becoming clear within the next few hours. At this point, I'm not going to take it much farther than this in the story because things speed up even faster than I've been trying to get them out now. Um, there's one part in there I do want to tell you about this. He does give the remaining disciples a warning, and he's talking directly to Peter. And he says, well, Simon, Satan has asked for permission to sift you like wheat. And when he says you, he means all of the disciples, meaning Satan wants to go after all of them. Now, that kind of reminds us of the book of Job, where Satan goes to God and then he wants permission to go after Job. He has to get that permission. So I'm not sure if Satan is able to go to God at that time or not, or if it's just a warning that Satan is going to go, whether or not he's got permission. Not sure about that, but I'm going to take Jesus for what he said, that somehow it's communicated to God the Father that he wants to go after them, and Satan is going to. All right. So at this point, they finished up the meal and what they're doing, and they sing a hymn. And I thought, well, I wonder what song it was. Well, apparently there was a psalm, and you may know that the psalms in the Bible were used as hymns by the Jews and even by the early Christians. And even today, parts of some of the psalms from the Old Testament make up some of the songs that we sing. But there are some in particular that relate directly to the Passover, and that's what they would be singing about. And at this time, they then leave this upper room from this house and go to the Mount of Olives. And there is where we will take it up next time because things are going to get very bad. But for now, realize this: Jesus has started this supper tradition, and he knows it's not going to end with his death. It's going to go a lot farther than this. And that's what we do when we repeat this, when we take the Lord's Supper, sometimes called the Last Supper, sometimes called the Holy Eucharist. So it has different names. When we take it, we're remembering Jesus. And Jesus is not dead, he's going to die. And how all this happens, we will talk about next time. I'll see you then. Bye.